As the electric car industry hobbles along, one company has made a major technological breakthrough. I'm Catherine Rampell, reporting for Business Day Live. We'll be speaking to Liz Alderman about Italy's efforts to stave off the debt crisis sweeping Europe. And Stephanie Strom is here to talk about how some manufacturing jobs are coming back to the United States thanks to Starbucks. But first, I'm joined by Matt Wald in our Washington bureau to talk about some interesting developments in the electric car industry. Good morning, Matt.
Hello, Catherine. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very good.
So what is unusual about this particular breakthrough at A123 in terms of their new battery?
Well, batteries are kind of like people. They don't like extreme temperatures, heat or cold. And to keep them working right, you got to keep them at a moderate temperature, and that takes energy. So it reduces the amount of energy available to do the work, like moving the car. The battery in your ordinary gasoline-powered car also suffers in the heat, and that's why it breaks down. You got to replace it. It doesn't last as long as the car does. And the particular part of the battery that's vulnerable is a liquid inside the battery called an electrolyte, which shuttles the little electrons back and forth depending on whether you are charging or discharging.
So this particular invention, this particular breakthrough is expected to solve a lot of these sensitivities to heat.
If the electrolyte boils or freezes, you're out of luck. These guys have invented an electrolyte that's very hard to boil or freeze. It stays liquid at a much wider range of temperatures. So you could get a whole electric car with no thermal management system. It's cheaper, lighter, easier. Or you could get a new battery for your ordinary car that would last the life of the vehicle.
So the implications of all of this are that it would be maybe cheaper to make electric cars, is that right?
It would be cheaper to make electric cars, but it's not completely clear that's where the biggest part of the market lies. It might lie in a new battery for ordinary cars, which of course are, for the foreseeable future, going to be much more numerous than electric cars.
So this particular breakthrough is obviously good news for the company that developed it, but I understand that it also reflects somewhat well upon President Obama. Could you talk a little bit about how he is connected to this whole issue?
The president set a goal of 1 million electric cars on the road by 2015. That's looking less and less likely. Electric cars are not selling all that well. They're expensive. There are some people who are desperate to get their hands on them, but the bulk of the market of people who go out to shop and look for cars say, well, that's interesting, but it's not what they're buying. If we had somewhat better batteries, you could get much higher sales of electrics, which do several things for you at once. It reduces oil imports because you're running cars on electricity that comes from native sources, natural gas, wind, sun. It reduces air pollution. It makes life quieter, simpler, cleaner. We're not there yet, but this is one of a number of incremental steps that could help get us there.
And beyond that, it was somewhat embarrassing for the administration when Solyndra had problems, right? And in this case, A123 has been similarly supported by the government.
Yes, and in fact, the president singled out Solyndra and singled out A123 as examples of government spending that was producing a clean economy, producing job growth, etc. Solyndra, of course, is dead. A123 is by no means dead. It's just having trouble getting its footing here. Its future is not completely clear.
Well, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Catherine.
Turning to Europe now. As the debt crisis there grinds on, investors are worried that Italy could be the next domino to topple. Italy's stock and bond markets took a major hit yesterday in the wake of the bailout for Spain. Liz Alderman joins us now from Paris to talk about why everyone is so worried. Good morning, Liz.
Good morning, Catherine.
So as I understand it, Italy's debt problems are actually not quite as bad as those in Spain and Greece and some other places, at least in terms of the deficit that it is expected to run in the next few years. So why are people getting so concerned about Italy now?
Well, at this point, it all comes down to the issue of growth, which is what the Prime Minister, Mario Monti, has been trying to push, especially since he came into power in November in an emergency after Silvio Berlusconi was pushed out. Mr. Monti is basically banging the drum for growth in his country, but the problem is that despite Italy's, large size, it's relatively much more wealthy than a number of the other countries that have succumbed to the crisis. The fear is that the Italian economy will simply not be able to grow as quickly as is needed to reduce what is really still a mountain of debt that the country has shouldered for a long time, and that is quite likely to get larger as Italy finds itself footing a larger portion of the bill to support the overall Euro monetary union.
Right, that's sort of one of the ironies here, right? That as the Eurozone, members of the Eurozone are called on to help their less fortunate brethren, those who are more in trouble, then the rescuers get in trouble themselves.
Yes, I mean, what we've seen, obviously in the past couple of days with a very large 100 billion euro bailout package for Spain's banks, everybody contributes to that. And, the concern is that over time, if things were possibly to get somewhat worse in Spain, despite this backstop, that some of the bigger countries, Italy, as well as Germany and France, would have to basically continue footing a much larger portion of the overall bill. And don't forget that this weekend there are these crucial elections coming up in Greece, where there's a lot of concern that if voters vote in this a left-wing party that has pledged to repudiate Greece's bailout, all bets are off as to what could happen with Greece. Could it possibly eventually move toward an exit of the euro? For all of these reasons, the concern has been mounting once again since we've seen a lot of dominoes falling as to whether Italy could maybe be the next in line.
And what happens if Italy is?
Well, as many people have said, Italy is just simply too big to fail. People have said that about Spain as well, but Italy really is. It's the third largest economy in the Eurozone, behind Germany and France. And really, people hope that it won't get to that, especially because, again, it doesn't have many of the same problems that have plagued Spain. For example, its banks are sound. There are many national icons, brand Italy. Companies like Ferrari, Ducati, et cetera, are known sort of the world over. And yet Italy has really struggled to have serious economic growth for the better part of a decade. Nobody cared about that before, but since the crisis came, all of the vigilantes out there have been targeting anybody with this toxic combination of low growth and high debt, and Italy has that in spades.
Well, thanks, Liz, for joining us.
Thank you, Catherine.
Finally, the slow death of American manufacturing has taken its toll on small towns across the United States. But in one Ohio town, the pottery industry has found an unlikely savior, Starbucks. Stephanie Strom has been following the story, and she joins me now. Stephanie, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you went to a town in Ohio where they seem to be having a bit of a renaissance, or hopefully having a bit of a renaissance in terms of getting more orders for their pottery. How did that come about?
That came about after a man named Ulrich Honighausen, who owns a very successful tableware business in Northern California, heard Howard Schultz, the chairman of Starbucks, inveigh against dysfunctionality in Washington and tell American businesses that they needed to do something about it since the politicians weren't going to do anything about it. Mr. Honighausen had been looking around for a new manufacturing facility and had been thinking, well, maybe I'll do it in Northern California. He then talked to some friends and they said, well, why don't you look at East Liverpool, Ohio? This used to be the pottery capital of America. And when he got in touch with Clyde McClellan, who owns this small pottery called American Mug and Stein, and he realized that it would be better to invest that way because there's an infrastructure around the pottery business in Ohio. There's clay, there's mold makers, all these other things. That
because it used to be such a powerhouse in this industry.
Exactly. And so he then went to Starbucks, Mr. Honighausen, Starbucks, and said, you guys have this, you've been telling us we need to create jobs. I want to start creating jobs. Would you create a market for these products if I made them here?
Well, so that's interesting. There's this sort of patriotic political piece of all of this, but clearly businesses are not going to start creating jobs or ordering American-made products if it doesn't help their bottom line.
Right.
So how is it that this was in Starbucks' interest, or other companies for that matter, to order products from here as opposed to places like China where labor is cheaper.
Well, you know, Mr. Schultz at Starbucks will say this is more expensive than they could have done it in China. But the fact of the matter is that labor costs are becoming more expensive in China, making it less attractive. That's been its primary attraction. Also, manufacturers there are typically geared for massive orders, hundreds of thousands, and it takes 3 months or more. You have shipping costs, you have duty costs. So American companies are starting to look at their supply chains more holistically and saying, okay, well, labor is a piece of the cost, but so is transportation, so is customs duties, so is time, so is the inventory that I have to carry. What if I order 200,000 mugs from China and only 20,000 of them sell? I'm stuck with this inventory. I can order 20,000 mugs from American Mug & Stein. They can have it into my stores within, you know, a month or so. And if they sell really well, I can quickly reorder them because...
Well, so how representative is this type of thinking in terms of American companies that are in need of manufactured products? Are there other companies that are using sort of the same line of reasoning and deciding to place their orders in the United States?
It's, you know, the academics who study this will tell you that's a little bit up for debate. They're a little skeptical, but there are other companies who have brought manufacturing back on shore. GE in 2009 announced that it would start building 2 plants that are now operational to build very sophisticated batteries, not your type, you know, AAA or AA batteries, but batteries for things like electric cars.
So higher end.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for today. Please stay with us online at nytimes.com for our continuing coverage of this and other stories. I'm Catherine Rampell, reporting for Business Day Live. Thanks for watching.